Hello everyone. This is the 19th part of the story, Avatar in DC Universe. Chapter 57, The Avatar vs. the Justice League. Aden's point of view. The Man of Steel stared at me evenly without breaking eye contact. The House of L's symbol lay prominent on his chest and up close he looked huge. Intimidating too given the situation. I'd just trounced my former team and added Red Arrow to the ass-kicking. I doubt they had any favorable outlook on me as I currently was. Think carefully about what you want to do next, Aden. Don't make this situation worse than it already is. Black Canary didn't give up trying to make me surrender. And why would she? To anyone reasonable, that was the right move. The expected one at least. Given that I had been a part of the Hero Society for a few months, the assumption would be I was an altruistic individual like 90% of the Justice League. That I would always do the right thing. But here's the thing, the right thing is not always the correct one. And the League was the best example of this. I spared a glance at the gathered League members and instantly a feeling of sadness gripped me. This was just a fraction of the League, but the power they had, the technology under their disposal as well as their own individual power and connections was tremendous. Yet, people like the Joker and Victor Zsasz still walked around killing wantonly. What would it cost Batman to just break the Joker's spine, crippling him for good? That's not killing, right? But no. They can't do it. They can't even ensure that the government comes up with severe measures to keep these mass-murdering psychopaths from hurting anyone ever again. The death penalty or a strike rule. Where if you commit more than 3 acts intentionally endangering civilian lives, you're lobotomized or sedated for life or something. I'm not a doctor, but coming from a world where bullshit like this wouldn't stand, it was a bitter pill to swallow. The sadness gave way to determination. I was going to change that. It might sound cliché and self-righteous, but the truth of the matter was that these people hadn't been given another option by the League. It was either be good and stay on the right path or be bad and stay on the wrong one. I wonder what the League would do if the government suddenly decided that all supervillains were fair game and put out bounties on all their ends. Batman would probably try to save the Joker from Deadshot or a dozen other mercenaries. That's the kind of hero DC idolized. The Avengers at least did what needed to be done to save people. Enough exposition. I had to deal with this debacle first. I loudly sighed and made contact with Batman's eyes. Fine. My hands lowered and I started flying down closer to Superman. The Man of Steel smiled and nodded understandingly. Black Canary couldn't hide the look of relief that crossed her face. Wonder Woman and Flash also eased up somewhat. On the hand, Batman clenched his jaw and I could feel him narrow his eyes through the whites of his mask. Wait. He called out just as Superman placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You made the right choice, son." The batarang thrown to my position was taken out of the air by an air string and thrown back towards its source. Man, I love air bending. Superman was just now noticing that something was off. Too bad he kept most of his abilities suppressed. His reaction speed was fast, of course, but he couldn't do anything whilst he was still underestimating me. Yes, I did. Fuss ro da. An astounding amount of shockwaves exploded out of my mouth. My throat instantly felt raw as the sonic shout impacted the Man of Steel at close range. Superman's face turned into a pained grimace. I shrugged off the loose grip he had on my shoulder while sensing movement through the vibrations in the air. That was following the explosive impact of Batman's batarang that I'd delivered back to him. I lazily observed how mentor and protege were so alike that I knew Batman's opening move just from sparring with Robin. My plan was close to succeeding. To win this, I had to take the most dangerous foe out of the fight. And no, it wasn't Supes. A blur raced towards me faster than I could react. But Flash was distracted by the Man of Steel's pain. So distracted, in fact, that he didn't notice the invisible wall of air shield that appeared before him. The fastest man alive slammed into the construct in full force and bounced back with a bloody nose. The shield bubble closed around him and I lifted his body up. No traction, baby. I continuously rotated the sphere with more thick and thin layers to stop him from vibrating his way out. An improvised tactic. I had no idea if it would work or not. Gotcha. Before his fast healing could kick in place, a rotating sphere of wind covered Barry's head and started sucking out all the air inside his lungs. And the most dangerous one was down. Holy shit, I can't believe all that worked. Superman was on his knees with a trail of blood running down his ears. Black Canary was checking if he was okay. Batman was in a stance looking unsure. Holy fuck. Batma, no Bruce Wayne, was hesitant. He didn't want to hurt me because Batman left his opponents broken more times than not. I could use this and actually succeed. Then everything went wrong. Enough. Wonder Woman shot forward and I felt my body slam into the metallic framework of the computer. The chassis cracked under my back and breath left my chest. I couldn't breathe. I hacked as whole stars appeared at the corner of my vision. One attack had reduced me to this. I instantly realized what was going on. They had been taking it easy on me from the start. Just as Batman was wary to hurt a kid, so was Superman, the Flash, and Canary. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, was a warrior first and she knew the dangers of underestimating an opponent in the field. So she decided to get serious. I lost control of the air bubble holding the Flash afloat in the air and he escaped. Meanwhile, I groaned while feeling as if my chest had caved in. A sudden motion and I felt a metallic collar lock itself around my neck. Your resourcefulness always pays, Batman. What else do you have in that utility belt? The Flash wondered while breathing heavily. Focus, Flash. Batman merely grunted while checking to see if the inhibitor was working correctly. I am more concerned about his powers. Are restricted or not? Aden's abilities are out of the norm even when compared to other superpowered beings. Black Canary questioned. Her word struck me and I realized I still had access to all my abilities despite the fact that I had a power-dampening collar on my neck. So this type of device doesn't work on me, huh? But even if I was to attack them, I couldn't win. Not yet. I wasn't strong enough to take on all of them and come out victorious. But there was someone else who could at least help me escape. I hated doing this. And this time it would be the second time in 48 hours. My head rose up in difficulty and I smiled at Batman. Don't. He warned me grimly, already understanding what I was about to do. Still, I felt like I owed him something. An apology of sorts because of what was going to follow. The cave would be destroyed. No doubt about that. I'm sorry. I fell into the familiar haze of cloudy thoughtlessness, sinking deeper and deeper into unconsciousness. My sense of self was instantly gripped before I could withdraw to the furthest recess of my mind. In a jarring move, I found myself facing the Justice League members who were present. What is going on? I thought. I could see but I couldn't control any of my actions. This was new. All of them had shock written on their faces. By Hera. This power is overflowing. Wonder Woman commented, one hand unconsciously going for the sword strapped to her back. Seeing this up close is very different. Bats, you got a plan? The Flash wondered while moving backwards. An outburst of heat escaped out of my body in a close-range heatwave shroud. A pale bluish mirage. The power-dampening collar on my neck melted and flowed off my body without touching my skin. The melted parts of the inhibitor collar fell to the ground in a slag of red-hot viscous liquid. The metal behind my back followed the same fate and before long, I was standing in the middle of a pool of magma. Aden, this isn't you, you need to stop. Black Canary left Superman's side and came up to me carefully. I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. She was right, none of this was me. The Avatar state was an untamable beast that once unleashed, would only go back to its cage when it wanted to. Canary, stop. Maelstrom is not in his right mind. Once this state takes over, even he is not aware of his own actions. Talking accomplishes nothing. Batman ordered. The blonde woman turned to the Dark Knight and asked harshly. Then what do you propose we do? Take down a kid with lethal measures? Batman narrowed his gaze. We don't have a choice. Wonder Woman unstrapped her lasso of truth. Batman is right. She started off, addressing a stubborn canary. But we can also try something else. The lasso of truth might force the real Aden to awaken. I believe a fight with this other self would be catastrophic to the cave as well as Happy Harbor itself. The Flash sighed while watching the young boy with glowing white eyes watching them intently, studying their every move. The Flash remembered the State Kid Flash and the other members of the team had been in once they'd arrived. Aden had taken them all down. They couldn't underestimate him anymore. He was a genuine threat. I hate to do this, but I agree. This is the only way we can ensure more people don't get hurt. Canary, seeing she was overruled, tightened her hands. A pat on her shoulders made her look back to see Superman's kind and understanding look. The Man of Steel was back in the fight. We'll make sure that Aden gets the help he needs. I promise. Chapter 58, Broken Bonds. General point of view. No one moved. Then a loud screech sliced through the air, disorienting Superman, who was still out of it. The sound was as a result of the violent winds that had quickly sprang up near Aden's position, keeping the rest of them back and shrouding him within a pale green ball of wind that concealed what he was doing. The Man of Steel frowned. Batman. Tell me you have a plan for this. Distract him enough that we can take him down. The Flash looked at the detective in surprise. Are you telling me you don't have a countermeasure for him like you have for practically everyone else? Shocking. Something is happening inside that bubble of air. Canary commented, prompting Superman to turn on his X-ray vision. He's somehow manipulating the metal to form a suit of armor around his body and a diamond-like crystal material overlaid on his arms and legs. Superman explained. Batman grunted while using the scanning function of his wrist computer to penetrate through the gyrating wind sphere. It's diamond. Maelstrom knows that you're practically invulnerable to everything. So using that information, the solution it has come up with is hitting you harder to find out how far the invulnerability goes. There is also a layer of viscous water in between the armor and his body. An improvised shock absorber. Batman deduced. In line with your previous deductions about this entity possessing some form of artificial intelligence. Still got your touch, Bats. The Flash praised. Let's make sure he doesn't complete what he's doing. Otherwise, knocking him out is going to be harder than it needs to be. At the last drop of his words, the Flash sped off towards Aden and started running in circles on the opposite direction of the rotation of the sphere. The aim was to unravel it enough that he could give the rest of the League an opening to attack. A whirlwind of his own making sprang up around the Flash, directly below Maelstrom's air sphere. The tornado enlarged and slowed down the rotating mass of air covering Aden's position. The sphere grew clearer as the violent momentum of the air was stolen and bled out by the new tornado created by the speedster. It's working. Canary commented. The air bubble finally fluctuated, and taking advantage of that chance, Wonder Woman's lasso swiftly snaked out towards Aden. The Avatar spared a glance at the mystical object incoming, headed towards his torso and swiped out his left hand. The tornado that had been firmly in the Flash's control broke off and congealed into a mass of a greenish wind shield that pushed away the lasso. Wonder Woman spinned it around and back in a whip-like motion at their opponent again. But it was too late. The Avatar raised another hand and tightened it into a fist. The mass of winds that were now filling the whole cave with a heavy pressure collapsed onto a much smaller and rounder shape. The size of a marble. The Avatar's fingers closed over the compressed wind ball in his palm. Silence dominated for a single second. The only sound that could be heard was of the lasso of truth whistling through the air. The Flash, who had been pushed away after his tornado had been taken over by Aden, stared up at him and his fisted hand. Aden was planning something. All that air pressure compressed into such a small size. That can't be good. the speedster muttered to himself. The earth cratered below Aden and a pillar rose up to block the lasso. The earthen construct was sliced into two pieces, barely offering resistance, but that brief respite was more than enough for the Avatar to dodge the lasso. Pieces of rocks were left on its wake upon making contact with the wall behind. Batarangs cut through the air, thrown at the Avatar, who glided away from their trajectory. A brief motion from the ladder and rock projectiles from the wrecked chamber shot off to meet them in a clash that ensured the rocks won due to their numerous number. The projectiles pelted Batman's position endlessly, making the Dark Knight use a zip line to swing away. Superman came in between the rock bullets and Batman's body, blocking him from being turned into a sieve. The Avatar's face twitched and the right hand came up, covered in a blue crystal that extended from the fingers all the way to the elbow. Crystal projectiles shot out of the palm and slammed onto the Man of Steel's chest. Clark's face changed as he felt pinpricks of pain emanating from the places the crystals landed. He started dodging the attacks while his heart grew a tad bit nervous. He studied his palms and saw scratches cut deep into his skin. Blood started welling up. "We have a problem. It seems like the crystals have a touch of magic energy in them. Which means they can hurt you." Batman grunted while picking up a lone crystal shard from the ground and keeping it for analysis. "Can you get close enough to distract him?" "On it, Batsy." The Flash replied, blitzing off. His feet slapped onto the cold hard floor, then up the wall behind the Avatar. The Scarlet Blur pushed off the wall, aiming himself at Aden, whose attention was on Superman, trying to land a crystal attack on the Man of Steel. The Flash twisted his body and aligned himself to kick Aden out of the air. The Avatar sensed the impeding attack and pulled back the hand that was shooting crystal shards closer to his body. The other hand had not moved once ever since he'd closed his left palm over the small ball of air. The right hand stretched out and a rumbling sound dominated the room. A huge section of the earthen floor broke out from below him and covered his back as a shield against the speedster. The Flash widened his eyes. The boy had a way to detect his surroundings. The speedster vibrated his molecules and phased through the huge rock, only to find himself almost impaled by a huge crystal spike growing out of Aden's back. The kid knew about his ability and had even planned out countermeasures efficiently. A huge sonic blast sent pieces of the crystals flying away, saving Barry from getting gutted. But not from being blindsided. A piece of the rock from earlier slammed onto Barry's left side, causing him to fly away with a groan of pain following the crack of the bone on his left arm. Superman flew in close and caught his body before the Scarlet Speedster could slam onto the walls of the room. A shield of air appeared on the Avatar's left flank, shielding him from Canary's sonic scream. The shield rippled at the continued assault, but her attacks couldn't break through. Wonder Woman jumped in next, pulling her hand back in a fist. Another piece of rock came in between them, hiding Aden from her direct sight. Her sword unsheathed and she sliced the huge boulder into two separate pieces. Diana's eyes widened when a shockwave exploded out of Aden's mouth, similar to Black Canary's powers yet different at the same time. It was less refined, more uncontrolled, and sought to destroy rather than Canary's usual attacks, which sought to destabilize an opponent by targeting their auditory system, leaving them unbalanced. She pulled her hands back and slammed the wrists braces together, sending off her own shockwave attack at the quickly approaching sonic ripples. Time slowed for Barry Allen and Superman. Cracks appeared slowly over the walls of the whole room as Wonder Woman and Aden Hole looked frozen in time, clashed in mid-air. Their attacks met and the result left the Flash worried about the more squishier League members. "We need to get out of here or else risk a cave-in," the Flash advised Superman in their fast perception mode. Fortunately, the Man of Steel could react almost as fast as Barry, so understanding him was easy. "I'll get Batman, you get Canary." Superman nodded his head and off they were. A blue and red blur raced along with a fully scarlet one. The citizens of Happy Harbor felt a deep rumbling emanate from below them and quickly took cover, thinking it was an earthquake. Some folks noticed Mount Justice, which was off in the distance, shake and break apart at the foundations. A huge cloud of dust exploded out of the cave as the rocky exterior broke off into pieces that fell into the water. The Flash coughed slightly while rubbing the dust in his eyes. "My God! Mount Justice!" Canary exclaimed. Even the Flash couldn't believe it. Where the mountain had stood tall in defiance to all, now there was only pieces of rock and wrecked machinery left in place. The Flash swallowed the brief surge of pain. This was their first base. The place where they had created bonds that had seen them through everything. The Flash looked around and saw Superman and Batman near them, no worse for wear. Batman nodded his head at him. The Dark Knight's way of asking if they were all right. The Flash returned the gesture half-heartedly and turned his attention back to the destroyed base. "This fight has gone on for too long. I thought John would come back with reinforcements by now," Flash commented, finding it weird that Batman hadn't asked for some more League intervention. "Maelstrom destroyed the Zeta tube controls," he grunted. "What? How? When?" Everybody turned to stare at the Dark Knight. Batman narrowed his eyes at the dust-covered direction of the destroyed base. "It was done in a way we wouldn't notice. Subtly. During the time he was attacking Superman with the crystal shards, some of his attacks accidentally seemed to land on the Zeta tube system controls. I only noticed it when I asked you to keep him busy." Wow. Everyone started thinking of Maelstrom differently. That completely confirms it. Whatever that thing is, it's undeniably intelligent, the Flash stated. "We can't hold back anymore." Superman sighed. "Now that the fight is not confined to inside the cave, we might be putting civilian lives at risk. We need to take him down. Hard." Before the rest could reply, Superman held up a hand. Something was coming. A body cut through the dust-covered air and slammed onto the ground, digging a groove on the earth to stop before them. Wonder Woman groaned and gingerly stood up. "His attacks are getting stronger," she told them seriously. The dust cloud cleared up suddenly, and above the scene of destruction, the Avatar was fully revealed. His form was just as Superman had said, covered with metallic pieces on his torso and lower body. The lower portion of the four limbs was covered by a bluish crystal that glowed in the night sky. He looked down at them and for the first time, smiled creepily. The left hand that had been enclosed all this time opened. The marble of compressed air appeared, but this time it was different. A red flame ring had manifested around the ball along with a ring of water, earth, and inside the rotating marble sphere, sparks of electric energy could be seen dancing erratically. "What is that?" Wonder Woman asked while tightening her grip on her sword. "Seems like an amalgamation of all the elements compressed tightly into a very miniature size. An elemental bomb," Superman informed them grimly, after using his supervision. This is what he was planning from the start, Batman realized. "If that thing explodes..." Black Canary started but went silent following what happened next. As if her words were the trigger, the Avatar dropped the rotating ball. "Number. Aden, what have you done?" Pandemonium followed. Chapter 59, Priority Target. Aden's point of view. "I could feel every single action my body made, yet, I had no control of it. My face stretched out into a wide, arrogant and sinister smirk. The grim looks on their faces reflected my turbulent emotions. A foreboding feeling gripped me. The left palm I had tightened into a fist opened and from within, a swirling mass of elemental chaos appeared. Held together solely by my will. Horror bloomed inside me. No, don't drop it here, even the town won't be spared." I instantly realized my biggest blunder so far. Using my negative emotions as the trigger for the Avatar state. It now saw them as more than opponents or obstacles to overcome if I was to gain freedom. They were now enemies. And to the entity, the action to take against an enemy was to eliminate them, no matter the cost, or to deter them from ever taking another harmful action towards me. This was more than just escaping. It was now about proving a point. The elemental bomb dropped from my palm. The control held true until it was near the ground, at which point, the ironclad wall holding it together unraveled, and the whole thing exploded. A massive shockwave rippled out, taking apart the wrecked debris of the destroyed base into tiny pieces that pelted the area. Superman and Wonder Woman stood in front of Batman and the others while the Flash ran off to save any civilians near the blast zone. The water was pushed away from the epicenter, turning into a wave that grew larger and larger the further it went. Following the shockwave, a chaotic elemental energy wave burned, froze, shredded, and crashed at everything near, leaving behind a huge crater on the ground and bearing down on the Leaguers, manifesting as a blooming dome of white energy. General point of view. Superman's hand, placed in front of his face, started burning. He winced in pain, realizing that the energy wave that was growing larger by the minute had the same touch of magic as Maelstrom's attack from before. He had to do something before it was too late. Flying was out of the question because of how close the attack was and the town behind them. He took in a deep breath and released it in a huge blast of chilling wind. Steam rose up from the contact of his ice breath and the energy wave. His body started getting pushed back, the feet digging grooves in the air as his attack did little to stop the incoming attack. His heart started pumping erratically. The palpitations as a result of his worry and fear. Worry that due to their leniency and holding back, the people they were trying to protect would die. But Superman would never back down. No matter what it cost him, he held on, roaring as his eyes lit up and heat beams, chock full of his body's processed solar energy, activated. The heat vision slammed onto the energy wave and fed to it, having the opposite effect of Superman's intentions. Before it could swallow them whole, emerald green light covered the whole thing, halting its progress. Backup had arrived. Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart flew down with their rings stretched out towards the elemental wave of energy. A dome-like green construct was covering the whole thing. Behind them was a construct attached to Stewart's back, a platform carrying the non-flying members of the League. Canary blinked in surprise while massaging her eyes. The screaming wind had died down as the thing Aden had dropped on them was dealt with by the others. She saw Captain Atom fly down towards the construct, and following coordination with the lanterns, the upper portion of the green shield opened up. He directed the energy upwards in a white glowing pillar that illuminated the night sky like the sun. It was beautiful and terrifying. To think that Aden could be capable of something like that. She wasn't doubting his power. Not even in the slightest. What Canary found hard to believe were his actions. It wasn't like him. No matter hard he'd been pushed, Canary looked behind them at the Happy Harbor community. The fire brigade and authorities had already arrived, forming a perimeter around the whole scene. Aden would never endanger innocent lives. The whole thing could be explained away by the fact that the Avatar state was a primal will of brashness that activated with the sole purpose of fighting those battles Aden himself couldn't. Yet, no matter how much logic prevailed, Black Canary felt like something else was missing from the whole picture. She looked at the dark night beside her and narrowed her eyes. If there was anyone who had the answers she was looking for, it was none other than Batman. I searched the whole place. Maelstrom is gone. The Flash stopped before them. Batman grunted and turned on his wrist computer, narrowing his eyes at the projected data. The trackers I put on him have been disabled. We've lost him. He rose up and started walking away towards the cordon being set up around the perimeter of the whole compound. Canary stared at his back and felt as if Batman wasn't trying too hard. Usually he'd be going crazy and bonkers at the fact that a 17-year-old with the power to rival almost half the Justice League was out there in the world, unsupervised and volatile. Canary was right. Something was definitely off. Dinah, are you all right? Green Arrow asked, stepping off the green construct platform. He came up to her and lightly touched her shoulder in concern. She must have looked as bad as she felt, if Ollie was so worried. Yes, I'm fine, Ollie. Just had a long night. She answered, smiling slightly and leaning her body against his. To smell his scent was exactly what Dinah needed to make her forget about their massive blunder. Call it what you want, but the reality was that they were to blame. Pushing Aden out off the team was not a wise decision. What frustrated her was how nobody else saw that. She spared a glance at Batman, who was now talking to Manhunter in a low volume. Dinah frowned. No, not everyone. Batman knew something. He was smart enough to have foreseen all the possible outcomes. And whatever plan he had, Manhunter was privy to as well. Just on the principle that Batman would find it a chore to hide the information from the mind reader. The Martian returned her stare and nodded at her. Canary simply looked away. The Robin Hood-themed hero studied at their surroundings and chuckled without humor, unaware of his lover's conflicting emotions. Yeah, believe me, we all saw it, he replied, referring to the massive upsurge of energy that had dwindled into sparks of falling embers that made the whole sky look. It's beautiful, Green Arrow said softly while hugging her body close to him. Yeah, it is, Black Canary found herself answering. Batman came back and called the rest of the League present to gather before him. As of right now, Maelstrom is a priority 1 target, just next to finding Red Tornado's whereabouts. We will coordinate with League associates and try to pinpoint his location. I don't need to tell you just how dangerous he is. Not just because of his incredible powers, but because of his potential. He's a resourceful and gifted strategist. I can't believe Mount Justice got destroyed, Hal said in a heavy tone. A brief silence dominated among the gathered members. The base had meant a lot to them in the past, and now, all that was left behind was an open space which the water flowed in and occupied. The beach now ended in a cliff that was overlooking the crater caused by Maelstrom's attack. Superman stepped forward and cleared his throat. Canary noted how the palm of his hands was slightly burned and the scratches on his costume. It wasn't common to see the Man of Steel pushed to such a disarrayed state. Canary understood, however, that if there was someone who had had it worse in that fight apart from her, it was Superman. Superman was the beacon of truth, hope, and justice. All that translated to a nice guy who didn't want to hurt anyone. Least of all a kid. He ran a hand through his face and sighed. I'll be frank. We fucked up. Everyone did a collective intake of breath. Clark had cussed. Holy cow. Is this the end of civilization as we know it? The Flash asked. Superman continued without caring for their surprise. We could have handled the Maelstrom situation differently. Voting him out of the team would not have led to this. Him attacking his teammates. Ex-teammates. Green Arrow interrupted. He hadn't hidden how much he disliked Maelstrom. Dinah pulled back from him and looked at him in disbelief. Are you serious right now? Ollie stared at her stubbornly. It's the truth, Dinah. Look around, this is the work of a misguided teenager. Jon Stewart interjected while crossing his hands. The League is as much to blame for this as he is. And if I remember correctly, you were the most vocal about suspending him. Had we not listened to you, maybe none of this would have happened. Or it would have, a different day or a different scenario. A day when we didn't have our guard up. A scenario where the League's fast response would have been slow. Let us not be quick to cast blame on each other. What is done is done. We should now focus on ways we can deal with the situation. Wonder Woman said her piece. Diana is right. Maelstrom is the League's responsibility now. Whatever actions he takes will be as a result of our failures. Let us learn from this. The Man of Steel implored. Let us show the world that we are still a symbol of trust and dependability for everyone, despite the circumstances. We stand together in our successes and in our failures. Black Canary internalized the words and made a promise to herself. Never again. I will not let this happen ever again. Aden's point of view. I stood before him. It was like looking at a mirror. A mirror with cracks, yet the cracks that did not detract from the image reflected. I could see the same curve to my jaw. A small scar on the corner of my eye from an injury during a bike accident when I was little. It was me. In all ways possible. It was me, despite the glowing white eyes. Yet, it didn't feel like me. At all. The actions the entity had done. The measures it had taken and the boundaries it had not only pushed but blasted through made me feel horrified that I was looking at myself. What are you? I softly asked the Avatar state. This marks the end of part 19 of the story, Avatar in DC Universe. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.